Welcome to White Guys for Kamala. This is part 2 of our discussion with Democratic strategist Christian Esperias.
I think Hillary Clinton falls into and had to break the glass ceiling for Kamala in the fact that, to your point, women have to do 10x what men have to do. And it's impossible because sometimes they fight against each other, right? And I think Hillary Clinton's a perfect example of this. It was to quote unquote play the game to get to where she was, the Senate Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. She had to look a certain way, right? Our politics then became broken for a number of reasons, right? The internet, Trump, polarization, literally a new generation of millennials and Gen Z coming up into the voting age and demanding something different. All that to say is that she was a victim of this tidal wave that she had no control of. I think another one is a perfect example is this O'Malley. He ran for president. O'Malley versus in 2016, he was the governor of Maryland, and he ran as hey, I'm a 50-year-old Joe Biden, and I'm gonna charm you my way, and got 0 votes in Iowa, and it was because he was running a campaign like you did if you were running 1992. And so all that to say is women infinitely have it harder, and I think this is what this campaign did right, and they learned from 2016 was Hillary was taking on I have to explain the Democratic platform, I have to stand up for Obama policy, I have to differentiate myself, and I have to fight the patriarchy and I have to defend feminism, right? And she had to do all that. I think this campaign, what it was doing right, is Kamala isn't talking about the crazy cat women thing. She's having reputable, trusted, worthy people to say excuse me, I'm not this stereotype and I'm not ashamed of it. Where she can just say this is who I am. This is the kind of policy I'm in. So I think they're doing a masterful job of it all. And yeah, it's just, again, her authenticity is coming through that that I think this is going to be for the next generation or so, we're going to want to see the authentic real life person of it, because we no longer wear 3-piece suits to get on the train to go to work as we all read the newspaper with our top hats on. Right? We don't live in the madman era anymore. People want authenticity.
Well, someone who does think he still lives in the madman era, this weekend, Men Making Men Look Bad, RFK Jr., who I think we've already had in this category, but he really outdid himself this week. Big news of last week was that a journalist, Olivia Nuzzi, was had to go on a leave from New York Magazine because it came out that she was having a certain kind of romantic affair with RFK Jr., whom she was covering. And this is really the issue, is not that you're getting involved with the politician. It's one that you're covering, and while you write articles about his opponents or while you speak up about him to other news outlets saying, hey, this candidate should be getting more attention. And so it made her look bad and really damaged her credibility. I'm sure she'll end up working for Barry Weiss at some point. But as far as RFK Jr., he's just a 70-year-old guy. He's in the same week, he's had to tell his wife that he's under investigation for decapitating a whale head off of a washed-up body in, I think, Cape Cod or something. And he has to tell his wife also, okay, and I've also been sexting with this 31-year-old reporter who's been sending me nudes. But, hey, it's okay. And now I'm working for the Trump campaign. So I remember when he came out, there was an RFK Jr. Sign in my neighborhood that said, declare your independence. And that's so much of what it is, I think, for third parties, is that vanity feeling of I want to be different than the Democrats that don't promise enough. I want to be different than the toxic Republicans who are all about racism and misogyny. And I want to demand more and stand out and feel better about myself with who I'm trying to lend my support to. It's just that too often it's just a race for other narcissists with much lower expectation threshold to try to come at you for that, approval and some money, hopefully. But, we look at Jill Stein, and she makes no bones about the fact that she hasn't accomplished anything and that she's just going to talk down about everyone else. And she's like, hey, that's my jam, I'm here to just shame everybody else for not being as good as me and as virtuous, even though I have no plan or even expectation of getting near the White House or near power. That interview, just when you think she's out of her depths, there was that interview on the Breakfast Club a week or two ago where she didn't know how many members of Congress there were, and that's like 8th grade civics stuff. Like people who take the immigration, the citizenship test have to know that there's 435 people who in Congress. And so that sort of shows people like her, RFK Jr. Are so when they make these kinds of fledgling efforts to try to claim themselves as presidents, it's really like a big red flag.
In classic toxic man act, not only did he was sexting a woman that he's not engaged or married to. I'm not sure if he's married or engaged, but he's having an affair, and then it comes out, and his one comment is, "This person that I'm sexting didn't write a nice enough article about me." Not like, I'm sorry.
Right.
Not like, this is a private matter. Oh, yeah, like, not only did I have a relationship, but like,
She wrote a hit piece.
She had a hit piece on me.
Yeah, she wrote about my dogs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That no one would consider a hit piece.
No.
Except for him.
Right.
And so classic problematic men behavior.
Absolutely. And it's already, I saw the New York Post already spinning it of like, oh, he had to block her because she was texting him too much. Like it's already the crazy female trope. I'm like, dude, this is a two-way thing, obviously. And yeah, you're running for office, and you're still like, oh yeah, I'll just have those start this side thing, with this 31-year-old. And
yeah, I think it's funny because a lot of that always, when you mentioned, the sort of 8th grade civics, like it's so frustrating to me when we see how knowledge and understanding of the system is seen as such a liability, because it just means that if you know these things, I mean, Trump kind of, I feel like, prided himself on how little he knew. And it's like, yeah, but that's what makes him someone who's going to shake up the system, because he doesn't know these basic things.
Like what a tariff is, yeah.
Exactly, and I think that when you but when you flip that on the other side of it, like Kamala is expected to know absolutely everything, and she clearly is.
Yeah, she does.
She knows a lot because she's been in that system, but it's just so. And we talked about this, in the past, this frustration with, committing your life to politics and government, and on a state and local level, and then obviously on a federal level as well, that somehow that makes you a sellout, or like that, like the only person that could possibly make any kind of change is someone who is a radical person who will go in and just basically be a bull in the china shop and smash everything. And there's not this idea of like, what about like being part of the system and figuring out slowly but surely how it works, and then utilizing that knowledge to change things for the better, fix things that are broken, things like that. But instead it's like, no, it's,
career politician.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so therefore you're either part of the, deep state, or you're just a person that has never, is just a litany of failures, that things you haven't changed over the last 20 years of working within that system.
Yeah.
And to your point of like moving the goalposts constantly, like welcome to like racism and misogyny and sexism, right? Like,
right.
It's just like these tropes will be like, I have to find an excuse why you're not good enough, right? And when the reality is, and then you're just like a misogynist or a racist or both. And so like, yeah, that's going to keep happening. That's not going to change. And I think trying to combat that, like I've made the mistake. If I can just logic you to death, and this is what Democrats do a lot, right? Like if I can just get you to write the right New Yorker article, person in the Midwest that like votes Republican, that can change your mind. It's like, no, the goalposts will constantly be changing.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think that's one of it. But to your point about Jill Stein, we always joke a lot that the Simpsons always predicted and get it right.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna age myself and nerd myself out, but like there's a Simpsons episode where there's a Halloween episode where all the billboards come to life. And the way you get rid of the billboards is they make a jingle and it says, just don't look.
Just don't look. Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the truth of the matter with like everything. And this is one reason that like as a diehard Democrat, as a diehard liberal who loves comedy and view, like, I pray at the altar of Jon Stewart, who was like my first anchor person. I still have a beef with like Stephen Colbert, because like he had Trump on like 2 weeks after he rolled down the golden escalator and came out and said, Mexicans, but when he says Mexican, he's racist, so he means like every brown person, which is me. You're a rapist and you're a drug dealer and you don't belong here and you're not one of us, right? And so me being Latino, I was like, oh, you're talking about me. And then Stephen Colbert being like, well, let me have you on the air, right? Let me have you on the air and give you more time and space to either validate that or, wash your sins away by talking about something else and be charming. Because one thing that Trump is, you don't get to be a socialite without being charming, right?
Yeah.
So this is one thing beef that I have with like even the Breakfast Club, like Charlamagne the God, you know better. Like you just do.
God.
Like why
Course,
why are you having Jill Stein on, right? And some people will be like, well, if we let them show how wrong they are, then people, and like no, that's been proven not to work. Like that's what we said about like Christian nationalists and Nazis. Like you give them a platform, they just get more fans. It's not the opposite.
It's legitimizing.
Right. Like it all legitimizes it. And so all that to say is like let's just stop talking about them. Like this is one problem that I have on the left is like stop retweeting this toxic Republican that literally makes money off of the retweet that you're giving them.
Yeah.
So we can just like hate fill their comment section
Right.
where they make more money off of it.
Right.
You know what makes them go away? Not like literally ignoring them because then they don't get any money, they don't get any retweets and so on and so forth. And so like that's my Jill Stein thing. It's like, why are we still talking about her? She raises no money.
That's right. Yeah. And now to go headlong into that, this is a guy that needs to be deplatformed, and he also has to be sort of called out for being as empty as he is because he's done a really good job of intellectualizing his lies this week for Don't Be That Guy, Chris Rufo. He helped lead the charge against as you bring up all the time, what was it, the CT?
Anti-CRT.
Yeah, the critical race theory. He made that into something that was super scary. He did a lot of it by making sweeping exaggerations, whereas if a workplace would say like, oh, we want to have a seminar for people who are interested to talk about diversity so that we can recognize this in our work, in our office, and also in our customers. And he would say like, they're having mandatory 3-day strapping down white men, insulting them seminars, telling them everything they've done wrong in history. This has got to stop, and then somehow he ends up in the New York Times, pushing these things. And so, and he's makes no bones about it when he says to the people on the right, saying the goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper and immediately think critical race theory. We have decodified the term and will recodify it to annex the entire range of cultural constructions that are unpopular with Americans. Now, the fact that a lot of what he was saying is filled with errors and he didn't want to, correct that was reported on, and even lying about the fact that he got a degree from Harvard, even though it was actually like Harvard Extension, that's sort of like if I took a couple classes at UCLA Extension, which I've even taught there, I wouldn't say I was a UCLA professor. So he's already somebody who is obsessed with that sort of stature of the left, but also wants to take it down. And so it was fitting that he went after the actual president of Harvard, a black woman who had earned her presidency, to go after her about plagiarism, citations in a story. This isn't a real scandal, but we've seen how things like the Shirley Sherrod scandal happened with Breitbart posting misleading videos about her, Acorn, certain things, and it's always coming after a black woman in power, Bertha Lewis in that case, and with Acorn, whom I got to interview, and she was pretty funny about it actually. So this is he makes no bones about the fact that he's trying to take people down, and he's also notoriously anti-immigrant. He wrote an article, and I remember reading this book, and I didn't know who it was, about going to London and how he saw people who weren't white and he was scared of them. And so he talked about how like immigration's out of control, it's ruining the UK, and yet he provided no statistics, no interviews, no evidence of crimes,
right.
Nothing. It was really just his own latent fear. And he also jumped in front of which we talked about recently, the fear-mongering around Haitian immigrants, saying that he would offer a $5,000 bounty to anyone who could prove that they were eating pets. And J.D. Vance retweeted one of his a video that he came across, which I thought about sharing, but in the interest of not platforming these guys, it included nobody was in the video. It was somebody off camera, a guy which looks like he's making jokes about his own cat while what looks like there were chickens on the grill. But that was evidence. That was all that he needed. Right. And that was the gotcha. And there was no clue as to where this came from or when. And so The hypocrisy comes in when it has to be pointed out that he actually married an undocumented immigrant from Thailand. And it's always these white nationalists who have no problem with their Asian wife, And funny how that is every other color and race that's a problem. But he had to put a post saying like, hey, what's the big deal? I don't understand why she's getting this, this horrible treatment from people. And it's really not fair. And you guys should be tolerant. But more to his hypocrisy, it came out last week through Lauren Windsor, whom I also actually happen to know. She just did a basic search in the ashleymadison.com email dump. And this is a website where people go to cheat on their partners and happen to find his email in that batch. And this was from years before he'd become a public figure, and someone else verified that this is what he used when he was filled out a form for the Seattle City Council. And again, we don't have to judge people for their sexual proclivities, but we do get to judge their hypocrisy.
Yeah.
So he was quoted here in Rolling Stone saying, when he was against the pill, he said, "The pill causes health problems for many women. Recreational sex is a large part of the reason we have so many single mother households, which drives poverty, crime, and dysfunction. The point of sex is to create children. This is natural, normal, and good." And so when you talk about don't be that guy, Chris Rufo, we don't have to give him too much air, but we can't point out that he's full of shit. We can't point out that he's racist. He comes up with excuses. He uses a lot of intricate, ornate language to try to other people, and is very deliberate in his methods. He has been working at New College in Florida, which is what DeSantis took over. It was a state school, and they immediately fired most of the staff, and they also recently disposed of thousands of books because they don't want those books, anything about gay people, anything about single family households, things like that. So you said you had some knowledge of Chris Rufo and his MO.
Unfortunately, I do. So I think for the last 4 years or so, I've been well documented. So I work a lot in Democratic politics, and one of the main areas that I work is educational policies and systems of things of that nature to create more equitable education. And so when he came onto the scene, he came out with attacking critical race theory, right? This thing that everyone who's probably hearing this knows has been debunked, that we don't teach it there at the college level thing, but it's also an inherently good thing that lets us to think about how we create a more just society.
And it's a theory. Okay. It's a theory. That's the other thing.
A theory that, hey, how about we take in consideration that people are really being oppressed, and like we should make systems that don't oppress them.
And the counter argument to that is just like, you're bumming me out, man.
Yeah. Like, you're ruining my good time.
Ooh, yeah.
We can talk about snowflakes another day, but but no. So we fought him, and look, as much as I despise him, as much as I've tried to defeat him in various different ways, from running super PACs against his super PAC, and working with think tanks to put out like real thoughtful, critical things of like, hey, superintendents of school systems and state superintendents, this is why you should not do this. But I digress. So I will gladly dance on his grave and his hypocrisy here, because going back to the start of it, it's like shame. Mm-hmm. Shame means something different to him. Being a quote unquote good Christian is a shameful thing, and I hope this goes against it, because like, we shouldn't hope bad on people, but like, I'm a petty person, and this guy's and look, I think the serious thing, like one thing that I want to note on is like, I think back to the movie The Network, based on Mark Zuckerberg and all that, and there's
Social Network.
Yeah. So Social Network, there's a scene where he meets with like the guy from Napster, and essentially he says, well, you didn't bring down the music industry, and he's like, didn't I? Like, and he did. The guy who came up with Napster revolutionized music as we know it now. As much as I hate to say this, he's done that for DEI. Mm-hmm. There are literally now books in the country that make slavery not kidnapping, not human trafficking, but rather an optional thing that people volunteered into, or a beneficial thing, right? This will have a ripple effect for generations, right? And it's sad, and it's true. And it's easy living here in Los Angeles and saying, well, I don't live in Florida, let the Floridians live there.
Right.
But I worked in Florida. I lived in Florida. I have a lot of loved ones in Florida. And also, like, even if I didn't, there's good, hardworking people who should see themselves in school books.
Yes,
and
certainly.
not have their history erased. So yeah, like screw that guy. I will throw a barbecue when he dies because he's a horrible human being and has perpetuated and systemically locked in racism, where people like myself either have to assimilate and lose my whole identity and only be white, or be another, to your point. And so this is a big thing. I hope he does have a lot of shame around this. Not because I believe that marriage should look one way or another. I could care less, but he's a horrible human being.
Yeah. And my question, and I pose this a lot, is how much of it is a thought behind a thought? Like how much of it is conscious? You know, when this idea of like, and I think, you know, going back to what we were saying earlier about like Democrats don't have the long game, like the sort of Machiavellian kind of ideas that you see sort of running through the Republican Party, which sometimes I almost don't want to give them that much credit, because certainly when the chaos is exposed, like to me, the 4 years of Trump's presidency was like, did you have any kind of plan when you were, you know, about what you were going to do, you know?
Yeah, even I expected something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, but you know, when looking at this idea of like the sort of, this is the strategy we're running, how much of the sort of like, we're trying to oppress people is a conscious thought? Because I always go back to this idea of that ultimately a lot of these people think I'm doing what's best, what's ultimately best. Is there going to be people that suffer? Sure. Is it going to be something that some people it's going to make other people's lives better? But ultimately I'm smarter than everybody else. So I know how to run this country and all these other people don't. So they feel like it's for the greater good, even
or
if they,
like you're saying, sorry to interrupt, like, I don't want to hear about this, man. You're putting all this pressure on me.
Right.
You're making me feel bad. But yeah, how many people are like, no, white is right.
yeah.
You know, women should be secondary.
Yeah.
All these people, you know, they're all immigrants to me. I don't care what their status is. Just like J.D. Vance was saying about Haitians with asylum, I'm still going to call them illegal.
Right.
It's, you know, it doesn't get louder of a dog whistle than that.
Yeah.
No,
That's true.
I think that's the thing. Like, right, like when you peel this onion of Chris Rufo specifically on this thing, I think people saw it as a conduit for like what they want, right? And I think this is the perfect example back to Trump, which is like I said, no, they got things done, right? And so it's not this like this global network where we meet in shady rooms, cigarette fill. It's like there's a handful of people who are really smart and know how to use power. Nancy Pelosi being chief among them. You know who else is? Mitch McConnell.
Right.
And Mitch McConnell care about three things, right? Deregulating everything, corporate tax breaks, and the courts. What got accomplished? Those three things, right?
Right.
If he cared about like erasing rights for LGBTQ community, that would have happened too. So,
Right. Exactly.
same thing with Chris Rufio. Chris Rufio, I think he was the guy like, hey man, I don't feel good about being a white man in this country anymore, and I want to put an end to it. Within that, is there like white is right? I don't know the guy at all. I've been in his presence a few times, but I don't know the guy. But that being said, there are some people who are funding his ideology and his platform
Right.
to get what they wanted. So like there's people like the Koch brothers. Do I fundamentally think the Koch brothers believe like are racist? I don't know. Like I can't tell you one way or another. Again, I don't know them, but they funded a lot of the things that sprouted out of it, like Moms for Liberty. Right.
Right.
And I think in their mindset of the Koch brothers, it's like, I fundamentally am a libertarian first and foremost. I think everyone should put themselves out of the bootstraps. And hey, some people are going to be screwed over, and that's on you. Get government out of the way. I think,
Right.
like to your thing, are they altruistic and they think they're right, and we can disagree? I think there's some of those. But I do think, especially with Chris Rufo, where he is now and all that, like I think he is very much like, I am a white nationalist, but I don't want to be called one.
Right,
And I
yeah.
don't want to wear the cap and gown. And I don't want the negative to come with it, but also I want the superiority of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing, I think, when we notice the difference where the two sort of groups that meet of the people, like, I'd say, and I'm not necessarily super knowledgeable about all of the elements of this, but I would say Peter Thiel, for example, is someone who maybe goes into more of the, I just care about the economy elements. I just want to get rich. I have these elements, you know, these things that matter to me. And I'm sure he has some elements or some
people he wants to oppress. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I do think that it's interesting to see that the economic element and the morality element kind of combine forces a little bit. And that's
Right.
what I feel like it's been. You've seen this more with Trump than at least that I have a memory of in the past with other, Republican candidates, this idea of like these two groups merging together, like one being like, well, like in the case of what Donald Trump has delivered, it's like, yeah, tax cuts for the rich and overturning Roe v. Wade. And it's like both of those things are the biggest probably the biggest thing for those groups of people that were interested in that. They're like, I got what I wanted, which is the Roe v. Wade thing. I got what I wanted, which is tax cuts for the rich.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, what about all the other people that that voted for him that didn't identify with those two things as being their most important, like
that's where we get into like the race undertone of it all, right? Like I think there's been so much research done on this, but the profounding one was like after 2016, they focus grouped men, and what they found was essentially if you tell white people across the political spectrum, this goes for bleeding heart liberals in West LA too. If you go to white people and say, hey, do you want this colorblind policy that's what most politicians would call socialism, right? Like increasing Social Security, Medicare for all, whatever it is, like tax breaks for your first home, all these social benefits that you would get, they would say yes, like overwhelmingly say yes. Then you frame it in a, hey, this helps most marginalized people, which are people of color and like low-income people. The moment white people find out that it helps a black person, they're like, nope, don't want it.
Yeah.
So you're saying when it helps them too, or when they sort of say like, just so you know, when this is helping everyone, the people that will get more help because they have been systemically sort of pushed down.
The moment they find out it helps anyone that's not white.
Right? Really?
Yeah. So it's like, I don't want it. It's like we've done countless of experiments and research and polling on it, and essentially it's like, yeah, when white people find out that it helps a black person or a brown person, they're like, oh, in that case, no.
Yeah, count me out.
It feels a little bit like, people that were very, like, they hated the idea of forgiving student loans because they had to pay the loans themselves.
Right.
And the idea that it's like, well, if I had to pay these loans, then everybody else should have to pay them too, even though it's like, well, but wouldn't it have been wonderful if you hadn't had to pay these loans? And isn't that something that we should be encouraging? The idea that it was unfair, perhaps, when you had to do it too. So even though you don't get to benefit, can you even see the positivity in helping other people that would get to benefit from that?
Yeah.
Do you think it's a similar sort of thing where they're like, well, I mean, but I don't want to like help people that aren't my tribe, right? Or is it that because they're like, I mean, I guess I'm not really asking a question so much as
I agree. It is that like my tribe thing.
I think he's saying it's like the limits of the empathy. It's like, oh, my empathy just sort of started to recede like the waves right here suddenly.
Right.
I just can't explain it. I can't put my finger on it.
Exactly, like exactly that. And to the other point that you made about does the policy have to like Trump only helped these people? It didn't actually help this person who's struggling, who's like legitimately struggling to make ends meet. They do revel in well, he says he's fighting for me, and that's what I keep hearing. This is what I keep seeing in my feed. This is what I hear in my bubble that I live in, so he's fighting for me.
Yeah.
But also, it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a renter, but if the place I'm renting is better than that person, then I'm still doing good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, it's that mindset of, like, I have to be doing better than whatever the other is.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they like in Trump, which is, like, he says he's going to do things, and I know in his coded language that he means like those black and brown people, those others. He's going to make it harder for them.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to make my life easier. He's going to make it hard for them.
Exactly.
Right.
As long as he's going to put his thumb on the scale of, and really immigration, I think is really the big one for them. And they've been talking about it a lot. And the fact that he'll even make the problem worse and still run on it. And they're like, oh, yeah, but just because he complains about it and uses such xenophobia in such disrespectful terms, he's my guy.
He's my guy. And that's the thing. Like, I think this is really smart of his campaign, which is like, if you are a black male in a battleground state, your feed has been, for the last 4 years, have been nothing but like anti-immigrant stuff, right?
Yes.
It's like these troll farms where it's like, here's a footage of an immigrant, an undocumented person doing something illegal to a black person. Right?
Yep.
And it's all their feed. And so that way they get 4 years of seeing that on their feed. And then all of a sudden, like, hey, this guy's going to kick out those people who you've been watching break the crime.
Yeah. Well, the hierarchy, I still got this over them.
Yeah.
So
you hear
I feel better now.
Yeah. If you listen to any of the podcast, the New York Times Daily, or the Runoff, when they go to talk to voters in battleground states, you will hear, and this is new, we haven't heard African American voters talk about, one thing I really care about is immigration. They've never said that, but they have this cycle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
it's
is the
been drilled
reason
in.
why. And to your point, like one actually said that on one of the episodes. It's like there's a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy, and like, what about us Americans? How come we're not taken care of first? And they're absolutely true. Like, I think that's something that we liberals like take for granted. Is like, no, like everyone put themselves first. We're all the protagonists. We all need our needs met, and then we will help others. And so many people aren't meeting their ends, aren't meeting, and so they're figuring like, all I keep seeing on my feed and hearing is like, we have more money for these immigrants at the border. And like my power is going to go off next week, right? And so there's this dichotomy, and so
Fear sells,
yeah. And so I think the one thing that I got to give Trump's credit for in their campaign, that actually being run by really smart people this time, as opposed to the last time, is that they're not talking. Trump last time around was like talking specifically about like those people, meaning the black people, like he's going to put them in jail. About the good old days, which is like dog whistle for God knows what.
Yeah.
Right.
He's staying away from that because he knows he just has to break off 2 to 3% of black voters,
Right.
and he wins.
Men specifically.
Right. Yeah.
And he wins, right? And so as long as he stays away from that, and then I think that's the other thing that is the dog whistle is like, white voters are racist. I love him, and they're like, I assure you that a great deal of Trump white voters in like Georgia and Arizona and Nevada and all these states, I don't think they see much difference between, to me, a Latino and an African American person. I think we are one and the same to them.
Yeah.
right? And so
It's
therefore
them.
the campaign doesn't have to specifically name drop black men.
Right,
They can
yeah.
just say immigrants.
Yeah.
And it's just others.
It's others. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
You're right. And so for our white guy of the week, setting a good example of this, this is a good cleanup job that Representative Eric Swalwell was doing in the wake of all of this Haitian immigrant othering, in a hearing for the House Judiciary. And Jim Jordan, who you don't see in this clip, but who you know because he never wears a coat, he always wears sleeves.
Right.
And he's famous for not taking action when
People were
wrestling
getting raped.
students were being molested under his purview. And this is a really good moment, and it speaks to what you were saying before exactly about what it takes to be viral, what it takes to sort of be authentic. And this is his I took theater in high school, and you hear how it's helpful in other things in life, and you're like, well, if I'm not showing up someplace with a stage and lights and in costumes, like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
But it sure does in politics. And so this clip of Eric Swalwell is just A+ for the theatrics of making the point.
What in the hell is this? The chairman tweets, protect our ducks and kittens in Ohio because he goes down some crazy rabbit hole, completely debunked that aliens are eating pets? My God. Are you okay, Mr. Chairman? Because last year, for a very long time, you tweeted and promoted Kanye West as he was calling for genocide against the Jews, and you kept it up. And now, when we have victims coming here, you're tweeting this nonsense. I don't know why you would do this. I hope you're okay. I don't know if the aliens who are eating your ducks are in the room with us right now, but Mr. Chairman, this is a serious issue. These people have loved ones who have been lost, and you tweeted this. So I am sorry that you came here expecting seriousness. You are serious. They are not, and you deserve a hell of a lot more than what you're getting from them.
I thought that was a pretty good job. And the AI image of the ducks and the cats, it's ridiculous what they need AI to make Trump look compassionate for.
Right.
Now it says so much when the people who are, say, bugging us about the show on social media or on YouTube
Right.
also have pictures of like the AI muscular Trump
Right.
because they need him to be that because he's so not that.
Right.
And so that disconnect is what Eric Swalwell is like up in arms about, literally, and doing the whole posture and all that. In case you weren't missing it, in case you were missing, in case you weren't getting what's going on, he's really laying it on thick.
I'm also fascinated by we're talking about shame and the defense mechanism to believe so wholeheartedly. I think you see this a lot in cults, obviously, this idea that like the people genuinely will sort of trick their brain into being, like I read the, news that basically like half of or more of all Trump voters, or people that say they're going to vote for Trump, do believe that the story,
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sure we could have a whole story about like how people respond to polls because they think it's going to support their guy one way or the other. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people buy into it, just like Will said last week.
Yeah, it's not even a thing of like, oh well, I mean, it's I wish he didn't say these things, or or he said it, but they're misrepresenting what he said. Like it's no, they do believe it just because he's saying it, and I think that is a sort of way to combat some idea of like, the emperor has no clothes. Like I am supporting, and it goes back to this.
He's got the best clothes,
right?
Everybody says so.
Everybody says so. It goes back to this thing that I just keep thinking in my head, which I know is not necessarily going to move any minds, but it's this feeling that like to support this person, you either have to be a fool, or you have to be like willfully ignorant, or you have to be like completely apathetic to so many things that are going on in this world, or what he's claiming he's going to do if you go by Project 2025. And so for me, it's just this trying to figure out this idea of like, so these people genuinely believe this stuff. So how do you change this? How do you shift these minds? Because like you said before, it's like you can't logic them to death. Especially when ultimately whatever fact they want to believe, they will.
Yeah, they'll just keep moving.
Yeah,
running all over the place with goalposts. Yeah,
and so then it just comes to this bottom line of like, all right, well maybe we just need to move on from this, because obviously they're still making hay out of it. They're still making that be the conversation that we're having, which I think again, because of the consequences to the Haitian community and to also the idea of others, that we are sort of creating this further polarization, further sort of segregation, even in terms of our belief systems and things like that. But I guess when I see this kind of thing, I think to myself, like, what are we supposed to do if not those things,
Well, I would just point out that there's 300,000 plus Haitian voters in Florida.
Right.
And so when you talk about how black men in swing states are being inundated with, the idea of like, yeah, but you're still above them. You're still above these other people, like this chips away at all of that. That just blows all that kind of like, subtle racism and hierarchy reinforcement. That just obliterates all of that because he didn't have anything else to say, because the economy is doing great. Jobs are going up. We're actually not in wars. And so we got to go off on some really obscure racist tropes based on a Facebook post that wasn't true.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like there's 300,000 of them in Florida, 20,000, I believe, in Ohio, in Springfield, Ohio. So it's easy is to marginalize them, right? Because where I live, we don't have them, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a them, right? It's not a us
it's
thing,
a
right?
them.
So I think that's a thing too. But to your point, like people just believe what he says, and I think we're giving them a little too much credit there. It's not that they believe just because he said it. Sure, there's a MAGA cult that like I will, pray at the altar of Trump. But take Republicans that are broader stream. Even the ones that I don't like him. What we forget is identity matters so much, right? Specifically political identities. So I worked in Texas for an organization called Battleground Texas, registering people on Trying to Turn It Blue, and at the time when Wendy Davis was running for governor back then, and we did a poll of essentially like based on all the data that we had, you are center or center left voter, but you're a registered Republican. And what the research came out is like, and focus groups came out is essentially like, there's an identity to be a Texas Republican. Mm-hmm. And I hate Ted Cruz. Oh, back then it wasn't Ted Cruz, but like I hate the Republican Party, what it's become. I voted for Obama twice, but I just can't call myself a Democrat because like there's an identity of being a Republican. Mm-hmm, and so I think that's where we're at right now, where it's like,
absolutely.
Why are people
so
voting?
much of it?
Yeah,
that's so much of it.
And like I can't vote for them because my entire life, my entire identity means they're the other team. I'm a UCLA fan. They're an SC Trojan. I'll never vote for them. It's that.
It's that deep.
Yeah. And so, and it goes back to your like why independents love being independents. It's that there's an identity to it, and so I think that's obviously harder to break. And like, but can you get them to act a certain way? Can you get them to vote one way or another on one election? Sure, but I don't think we have a lot of hope. Like people keep thinking like, well, we just need more Democrats. Like if we can just get a few more Republicans to become Democrats, it'll win. That's already happened. It happened really when Trump happened. When Lincoln Project, like everyone keeps thinking about Lincoln Project as the Republicans, they are a full ass cornerstone of the Democratic Party now, which are former Republicans who are now Democrats, almost begrudgingly, but they're like a pox on that party that broke my heart.
Right.
And so there's not going to be this big wave of Republicans coming over. Like that ship has sailed. People who are Republicans, they ain't going to move. Our best hope as Democrats is to get those independents to like start identifying as Democrats or just voting that way. Mm-hmm. Because identity really does matter to people. You can't break them of it. And look, as a Democrat too, like I do that at times. I'm like, well, the first thing I want to know is like who's a Democrat, who's a Republican. That's the easiest way I can find out who to vote for, right?
Yeah.
That means I don't look at the policy right off the bat, right? Which is not what we should do. Yeah. But so that's essentially why people aren't like doing the right thing. I think some of those Republicans, and I know some of them because I've worked in politics so long, I've worked with Republicans, and I've seen how powerful it is. You know, I saw my phone blew up on January 6th from like some Republicans friends that I had. It was like, this is disgusting. I can't deal with this, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward like a year later, I did this massive research project. I polled 4,000 Republicans across the country. And what I was trying to do is figure out what would it take for you to come over to this side? Mm-hmm. And what I found out is 2% of Republicans are willing to vote for a Democrat, even if the Democrat has every single one of their issue, they're right on the issue, and the Republican is wrong on every single other issue, they still will vote Republican because it's so ingrained in them. And I saw my Republican friends who were texting me on January 6th starting to say, well, the election was stolen. Mm-hmm. Not like someone cheated, but it was stolen because like in Pennsylvania, they automatically changed it to vote by mail. And that's not fair, right? So like they're spreading this light like further and wider so they can not say that my Republican Party is out of line with me.
Yeah.
They're making it fit for them. And again, it goes down to identity.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of identity, the White Dudes for Harris, which was the Zoom call, which started around the same time we started the show, they released an ad this week with a $10 million ad buy. And they're speaking right to the core of our identity. And I think that's why, you know, like you were saying before, I think, you know, we have so much that we can do to expand who we are as a demographic that that can do more than the party alignment. Yeah. So we'll check out the ad they put out.
So, I think we're all pretty sick of hearing how much we suck. Every time you go online, it's the same story. We're the problem. And yeah, some white dudes are. Trump and all his MAGA buddies are out there making it worse, shouting nonsense in their stupid red hats and acting like they speak for us when they don't. All they've ever done is screw us over. But if you're not on the MAGA train, where do you go? Isn't it just swapping out one crappy option for another? Then it hit me. This isn't about picking teams. It's about who's got a plan that's gonna make life better for me and my family. So I've been doing my own research and decided to check out Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And before you jump down my throat, they're actually talking to guys like us. No lectures, no BS. Just real solutions that protect our freedoms and help us take care of the people who matter. And honestly, I think Harris and Walz are the ones to make that happen. End of the day, you're your own man. It's your call. But if anyone gives you crap about it, tell them it's none of their damn business.
What's the word I'm looking for? How successful do you think this ad is going to be in terms of doing anything?
It's tough, right? Like I think the intention is dead on, right? And I think you have to, in politics, the number one thing is you have to do, and this is something we felt Democrats, is meet your audience where you're at. And I think this audience that we're specifically talking to are on different platforms, different channels, and speak a different language. And I think what this ad does really well is like hey, I'm tough, like I'm not going to take any crap. I think that's the right tone. I think that's the right pitch. I think that's dead on. And so I think it depends because you have to marry this with something else, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think you need to build like an echo chamber for this to work. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to what else they produce. But like I think it also matters where you're at, right? Because if I get this, if I live in Pennsylvania and I get this ad, I think it's wrong, right? Like this is super targeted, and this has to be targeted to essentially men under the age of 55, over the age of 30, and it has to like I gotta be watching like YouTube and watching like Barstool like sports or something, right?
Yeah.
For this to work, and then that's my hope, right?
Compared to say something like the Sam Elliott commercial where it's like, be a man, vote for a woman. Like, how do you think that rates compared to that type of tact?
I think we're doing I think we're still like not there yet, right? Like I think there's something, I think that's the perfect example. I think something about this just seems inauthentic, or maybe like too much. Like, I think this audience specifically will tell you, I'm not sexist, I'm not racist. I just don't want to hear it. Right?
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
And I think so. You have to play to that, right? And so that is a fine line you got to toe, right? Because we do know that there's internalized sexism, internalized misogyny, internalized racism in there. It's like, do you name it? Do you not name it? That's a lot of hard work to do. And so I think like going to like vote for the woman, I think that like gives some of these people the icks of like, oh, here we go. We're talking about gender again, right? Even though they're thinking it, they're looking for an excuse out.
Right.
Exactly.
And so I don't know. I think what would be a good supplement to this is getting people they trust and they know to come out and say the exact same thing in a different language, right? Like whether it's like, I don't know, Bill Burr. How Bill Burr come out and do an ad for her in a language that says like, that doesn't talk about vote for the woman. It just says like, those people are crooks and liars.
Yeah.
At least these guys are giving it to you straight. At least they're not trying to like ban you from looking at porn like Project 2025.
Right.
Something like that, I think, is a healthy complement to this.
Yeah.
But I think you need both because I think the CARES campaign has done what they had to do, right? Her first couple ads in this got a lot of beef was like, I'm tough on the border, I'm tough on crime, I'm a prosecutor. And a lot of Democrats on the left had like problems with it, but that's what she had to do. She had to prove like quote unquote toughness.
Yeah.
And I think we're at this point where it's like, okay, we checked that box off. Essentially, like we checked off like Democrats not jumping ship, and we checked off moderates not jumping ship. Okay, like now where do we go? Because this is just one big math problem. And our math problem on Democrats, it's really hard. Republicans, it's easy. Republicans plus MAGA gets you the White House. Us, it's college-educated white people, black women, black men, Latinas, some Latinos. And then pray and hope young people show up. Like that is a lot to have to deal with, right? And so we are checking this off. And so now we're at this point of like, we need suburban men to come out and not screw us. Yeah. And this is what this ad is for.
Yeah. And I think what the strength of this, and I think the strength of what they have going forward is to not just show you ideas of this is manly, where it's a guy with over the top hair, making dumb gestures and having it count as dancing. It's you want to be a man, you have male responsibilities. This will help you. These will help you with your family. These will help you with your job. These will help you with security, you know, and it's much more concrete ideas towards your role as a manhood and being in control of your life and what you determine to be your sense of a masculine identity, and not just, you know, buzzwords like we're guys, so we vote for guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good thing that these days the idea of manhood is more or less binary, and the idea that like I watch that, and even though I support their, you know, obviously we, you know, are you know, all on the same team, I definitely watch that and I go like, well, that's not me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, that doesn't appeal to me. I don't, even just in terms of the sort of like, you know, New York kind of accenty kind of thing that's thrown in there. But I get it that there are a lot of guys, like you're saying, that, and, you know, fine tuning a demographic. And maybe it's a positive thing to think that like, there was a time probably 50 years ago where if you were to make a commercial that was supposed to just be targeting men, it would be very easy to basically be like, okay, this is how we do it. And it will appeal to almost all men. You know?
It's very, very, commodified.
No, we used to live we used to live in an era where like the Man Show was like the most popular show on on like TV, right? Like try to get that on the air now. Like there's so many problems with it. And we're in this new generation where like what it means to be a man and masculine and like what is appropriate. And so like, it's this fine tuning that you have to do. And then the other part that like, we really have to focus on as men is like, we have to like not only be on the right channels of like where these people are, and like I mentioned some of them, but also like I think one thing I keep talking about, like stop mentioning women, and it's not because it's one part, like I'm a consultant, and it's like, look, a campaign doesn't have the time or space to change someone's mind or worldview. Like it just doesn't. All you're doing is selling them on what you have. If you think this campaign is meant to change their hearts and mind, you're dead wrong. None of these voters are going to change their mind on a single policy whatsoever. So you have to meet them where they're at. And I think what Obama did, and I think if you listen to Barack Obama's book or read it, I've listened to it, obviously.
I do too, man.
Yeah,
Totally.
Or like Pod Save America,
Yeah.
and I'm a historian of all this, is like the first campaign, they painfully did not talk about race, right? And it was because they're like, no one doesn't know you're black, right? Like everyone knows that. And so like, but also like you harping, quote unquote, harping on it, which they weren't, but like anyone who was like on the fence or like quote unquote turned off by it, they didn't want to hear it. Yeah. And I think this is what this campaign has done brilliantly, is like her campaign has never mentioned she's a woman. You see, you know she's a woman. And this is the problem I have with like the Sam Elliott ad and this ad is like, vote for the woman. It's like, shut up. Like, don't mention it. They know it's a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
The moment you do it, we are reptilian animals that are misogynist, sexist, patriarchal animals. We're going to be turned off by it. Because now you're saying it's not me.
Right.
The one ad that I saw that, like, I think didn't get enough credit in Michigan in the midterms, there was the abortion ballot. Abortion was on the ballot. And there was an ad. And a lot of my peers in the industry like rolled their eyes, and a lot of the women were like, "Oh, here we go." And the ad was completely from a male's point of view about abortion. And essentially, the ad was like I'm paraphrasing here, but like, be a good dad and be a good husband. Vote to like let them have their freedom. And they were right to roll their eyes. Like, why are we centering men on the women's issue?
Right.
But the thing is, we live in a patriarchal society. Our entire lives as men, we've been marketed directly to. We are the protagonists. The problem and solution is us. Right? Like the solution is us. In every ad, the solution is us, right? Yeah. We are the commodity that everyone wants. Therefore, these political ads have to talk to us, directly to us. And so making ads directly that talk in our language, that center us in the abortion conversation, that center us on, IVF, center us in our feelings and our thoughts on it, is the way you have to do it.
Yeah,
like
and how we can be men.
Right.
Yeah. So, so that's our show. Thank you very much, and thank you to our guest for being so on point about this. And if you want to support the White Dudes, you can through secure.actblue.com/donate/white dudes. We are doing this whole program as a fundraiser, more or less. So hopefully you can chip in. So thank you very much. We'll see you again next week, and keep sharing our show with clips with other people. Thanks again.
Thank you. Yeah.
This episode was recorded at Green Lab Studios in Los Angeles, California. Our engineers were Paul Roman, Daniel Amato, and Owen Stinsmullen.